Okay, so this next session, just want to go through and give you an overview of a project we've initiated called Breeding Better Breeders. Before I do that, I think it's important as part of our centenary to just reflect on certain achievements within the Angus breed. And when we look at that, one of the main achievements that I see within the Angus breed is the great genetic improvement which has occurred over, say, the last 20 years. So this graph here shows that the genetic improvement which has occurred, if we measure it by the Angus Breeding Index, and there's obviously many different ways that we can measure it, but if in this case we look at the Angus Breeding Index as an indication of overall genetic merit, we can see there's been quite significant genetic improvement made and a real success, and a pat on the back for Angus breeders. And currently that rate of genetic improvement is really around $3.70 per cow mated per year. So significant genetic improvement has been made over the last 20 years and continues to be made within the Angus breed. If we look at where that genetic improvement is coming from, then there's a couple of key areas. The first is really that the ability for us to put more growth into our cattle while maintaining calving ease. So the traditional curve bender, if you like, has been one of those reasons. The next is just that increase in growth. So with increasing growth, we can look at that two ways. We're either getting heavier animals at the same age, or if we're trying to target a market and a certain spec, then we're decreasing the age at turn-off, both of which is resulting in more profitability. And then in terms of the success of the breed around eating quality, so particularly the great increases and improvements which have been made in the marbling trait. So something that as an Angus breed we should be incredibly proud of and really and look forward to and reflect back on with some pride is the genetic improvement which has occurred over that period. Of course, if we look back and we say, well, over that period as well, what about the cow? So we might have made great improvements in those traits, but what about the traits which impact on the profitability of our mature breeding herd? So if we look there, we've currently got EBVs within the Trans-Tasman Angus cattle evaluation which describe a lot of those traits. So traits like calving ease, milk, fertility in terms of our days to calving, mature weight and docility. But there are many other traits which affect that profitability of the female breeding herd which are not well described. And so one of the things that Angus Australians particularly came from feedback from the Angus Breed Plan Consultative Committee was around, well, how do we address that? And so we've initiated a project with the animal science team at University of New England. So these two gentlemen here, Dr. Sam Clark on the bottom and Dr. Tom Grenlees at the top, where it's a 2-year project between University of New England and Angus Australia, where we're really looking at trying to better describe the genetics of animals for these important female traits. So initial priorities focusing on mature body composition, longevity, structural soundness, fertility. In terms of the initial work which has been done on mature cow body composition, we currently have in our analysis a mature cow weight EBV, but we don't have any EBVs which describe the kind of composition of those cows. So no EBVs are published for mature height or body condition. So we can have two animals with the same mature cow weight EBV, but totally different body composition. So tall skinny cows, short fatter cows, if you like, carrying more condition. So totally different types of body composition resulting in that same mature cow weight EBV. So the initial work really that we've done in this project is just to focus on better describing that body composition and particularly analysing the performance information which we have on the Angus Australia database for mature cow height and mature body condition to understand the genetics behind those type of traits. So particularly to do with, well, what's the heritability, so the proportion of differences we see between animals which are due to genetics versus other non-genetic factors, and what's the correlation with some of the other traits, so mature cow weight and milk particularly. Now it's important to really recognise at this stage that there's been a lot of work done in this over the last couple of decades, particularly in the Beef CRC, Cooperative Research Centre, in the Maternal Cow Productivity Project that was led by Wayne Pitchford at the University of Adelaide. There's been a lot of work and a lot of knowledge which already exists in this space, so we're not breaking new ground as such. The thing which hasn't occurred is, I guess, taking that knowledge and turning it into tools which we can use at industry in the terms of breeding values. And this project was really aimed at trying to address that. So the main results that to date, and these are pretty consistent with what we expect from that previous research, is first of all the traits are heritable. So we look there at heritability, say for mature cow weight, mature cow height, pretty highly heritable traits, around that 43 to 44%. So traits which if we make selection decisions on, we can make some pretty significant changes on those traits pretty quickly. Mature body condition has a lower heritability at 0.16, but it's important to note that it still is heritable, and that's a similar level of heritability to say what we have for weaning weight or 200-day weight. So we can select on it and make change in that trait due to genetics. In terms of the genetic correlation with other traits, well, we were somewhat constrained by the amount of data which existed on the Angus Australia database for those traits. But generally we can report that mature cow weight had a strong genetic correlation with height and body condition. So what that means is if we selected animals or sires, say with higher mature cow weight EBVs, then their daughters would not only be heavier, but they'd be taller and carry more body condition. So nothing too surprising there. Likewise, if we selected sires with lower mature cow weight EBVs, we'd get female daughters which were lighter, shorter, and carrying less condition or skinnier. So, but importantly, that correlation is not 1. So at 0.47 and 0.63, they are related, but there are individuals which don't follow that correlation and individuals which we can select, which we can start to bend those relationships and select the type of body composition which we think we want within our breeding program. The relationship between milk and mature body composition traits is slightly unclear at this stage, so it differed really depending on the actual model which the scientists used at UNE, so there's a lot more further research needed. So that's the work to date. I guess just to touch on this, work in this space is really ongoing now, so there's a lot of further work going on to look at the influence of the time of measurement. So particularly if we measure these traits being weight, height and body condition at different times in the production cycle, does that impact on the heritability and the relationship between those traits and what we see? So whether we record those animals at weaning as we currently do versus whether we record them either pre-calving or at joining. Whether we can, in the current analytical model which University of New England team came up with, only included one particular measurement on one particular animal. So looking at having repeat measures, particularly across different years, included in this is part of the research. Looking at the genomic component, so how can we harness the benefit of genomics in this area, and also better understanding that genetic correlation with milk. So this will continue over the next couple of years. In the short term, for those of you who were at the Angus National Conference in May, you'll be aware that the research breeding values were released for those two traits being mature cow height and mature body condition. So if we look at the mature body condition, here we have a group of sires where we look at the research breeding value, the accuracy value and the progeny counts. So obviously there's some fairly old sires there, so because it was looking at the data which was just on the Angus Australia database, that they are slightly older sires. But they provide for those sires some estimates of genetic differences in the body condition of mature females. They're reported, like all our breeding values, in the units of measurement, so they're in score units. So if we look at interpreting those, if we had a sire with a mature body condition research breeding value of plus 0.7 versus a sire with a mature body condition research breeding value of plus 2, well, we expect to see expressed in the progeny half of that difference. So a 0.5 difference in body condition score between the sires in terms of their research breeding value. So we'd expect to see, all other things being equal, that the daughters from the sire with the plus 0.7 would be carrying a quarter of a score more body condition than the sire with the body condition score of plus 0.2. Likewise for mature cow height, again here we've got a list of sires with their research breeding value, their accuracy value and their number of progeny, which have got a performance information for those traits. In this case they're reported in centimetre units, and again we expect to see, in terms of interpreting those, half the difference expressed in the progeny compared to the difference in those research breeding values. So if we had a sire with a mature cow height, a research breeding value of plus 15 versus a sire with a mature cow height of plus 5, we'd expect that the progeny, the female progeny of that first sire with a plus 15 to be 5 centimetres taller, all other things being equal. So we now have those two different research breeding values. How do you access that? They're all available from the Angus Australia website. So if we go to the Angus Australia website, you follow across the main menu there to the research tab, go down, and there's a link to Breeding Better Breeders, and you can get the PDF report which was released in May this year. As we go forward and we get more data in, then we'd hope to update and have updated values available from that site. In terms of how you might use these in selection, a couple of general comments that I would make. The first thing is we need to be very aware and mindful that there's quite limited size for which research breeding values are now available, and a lot of those sires are kind of yesterday's heroes. So because it was looking at that data on the database, you'll see a lot of quite old sires. They're not really part of our breeding programs, so we're aware that those research breeding values in terms of their utility in current selection decisions is pretty restricted. Likewise, when you're looking at the research breeding values, you need to be aware that they are research breeding values. So they are subject to more change, if you like, going forward than what some of our routine EBVs are. Simply as we improve the analytical models, then that can result in some changes. So there's a little bit of additional risk, I suppose, associated with selecting on the research breeding values, but nonetheless, then they can be quite useful. What it does do on those sires for which those traits are available, it does mean that you can go through and start to select on not just mature cow weight, but on the body composition as well. So we have those research breeding values for body condition and height, so you can select on those three traits simultaneously to really not just look at mature weight, but also is that body composition really what you're trying to do within your breeding program. In the short term, what we'd be really urging people to do is collect performance information. So if you're interested in getting these research breeding values calculated on your animals, really be looking at collecting more comprehensive information for not only these traits, but also other traits which are related to the profitability of the cow herd, so that we can do better research and provide better tools in those areas. So in terms of the performance measurements that we're looking at, one thing I've been encouraging all members to do is first of all, to do your mature cow weights. So when you take your 200-day weights on their calves, weigh those cows, but also collect body condition and height measurements. So that should be done within the 2 weeks of the 200-day weight on their calves. For those that are really keen, I don't think this is designed for everyone, for those that really want to assist with this research, also taking those measurements both pre-calving and at joining would add to the information that's available to understand that time of measurement influence. In terms of structural soundness and longevity, really trying to build better tools for those. We're encouraging breeders now to collect structural scores for the leg and feet traits on their animals, on their mature cows, I should say. Very clear on that, mature cows. So that the normal claw sets for front and rear feet, foot angle on the front and the rear, and rear leg, side and hind view. One of the things, these can be collected at any time throughout the year, so we're looking at one measurement on each cow each year, and by comparison to those younger animals which for inclusion in the current analysis that must be collected by an accredited assessor, we are encouraging members now to collect their own scores, in which we can look at that data to see whether it's useful and hopefully result in more information available for use in our structural analysis. And I guess we have a bit of a framework, if you like, a blueprint. The American Angus Association in North America has been doing that through breeder scores. It has been getting quite useful information out of that, so we'd hope the same thing occurs here. We have also looked at udder scores, so we've had some feedback from some members around udders and the need to maybe develop some tools in that area. So we're also looking at the time of calving, when you're collecting your birth information on your calves, also collecting some scores to do with the udder, so to do with teat size and shape, udder evenness, udder suspension, etc. Be looking at you collecting scores on your animals for those traits. Of course, to do with female fertility, the other really key trait, always looking at ways to improve our days to calving analysis, so really encouraging people to collect joining records and more comprehensive joining information to assist with that, the development of those tools. Now, in terms of how to do all those measurements, we have, through our Matt Reynolds, our breed development officer, gone through and put together a number of different resources. So you should have all received in the last couple of weeks this booklet here, Collection Guidelines for Angus Research, and also a body condition score paddock guide to how to collect body condition scores. So they provide all the information that you'll need on how to collect that information, so the collection protocols for all those different traits. It's been sent out to every member that was enrolled in the Trans-Tasman analysis. For other members who are after that, that's available on request from staff at Angus Australia, but there's also a module on the Angus Education Centre which provides a lot more information on how to collect those different traits. In terms of just for concluding this, I'll just leave you with some final thoughts, if you like, in this space, and particularly right at the start we put up a graph showing that the great job that we've done as an Angus breed in making an improvement in genetics, genetic merit over the last 20 years. If we put up a similar graph for mature cow weight, so looking at what's happening with mature cow weight, again across here the change which has occurred over that last 20 years, you see there's been quite a marked increase in the weight of mature cows within the Angus breed over that period. So around 40 kilos has occurred genetically. So what that means, if we took the current genetics, put them into production systems 20 years ago, all other things being equal, those cows would be 40 kilos heavier across the board. Or likewise, if we took genetics from 20 years ago and put them into our current production systems, then the average weight of the cow herd would be 40 kilos lighter. And that's due to genetics. That what they actually are differs because we've also made changes in our production system, but there's been a 40 kilo genetic change over that period. And currently, if we look at current times, we're increasing the weight of Angus mature cows at about 2.5 kilos per year genetically. So not only has it increased, but we're now increasing it at a greater rate than has ever occurred before. If we look alongside of that at our actual level of recording of mature cow weight, you'll see on this graph that we have, by the blue bars, around between 12 and 14,000 cows weighed each year. So there's a lot of recording going on, and we have a lot larger data set to work with than what might be collected in a lot of other Australian breeds. However, if we look by the red bar, we'll note that equates to about 20% of cows being weighed by comparison to the 200-day weights which have been submitted on calves. So only about 20% of cows are being weighed. And the message I'd really leave you with is that the mature cow weight of Angus cows is going to continue to increase unless we increase our rate of recording. And I really think we should, the challenge I'd put out to Angus Australia members and breeders of Angus cattle is around developing the modern curve bender effectively. So if we look, one of the successes, which we said right at the start of the Angus breed, has been the ability to put increased growth into our cattle while not increasing birth weight and therefore decreasing calving ease. And the only way we've done that is by recording both traits. So we've recorded animals at birth, we've recorded animals for the growth traits, and we've been able to bend that relationship or develop the curve bender that's often talked about. To me, the challenge that I'd put to the Angus breed is to now take that to what I'd call the modern curve bender, where we take animals, we continue to put growth in there, but into more moderate cows at maturity. And again, the only way we're going to do that is by measuring both traits. So we need to continue to measure our growth traits, but increase our recording of our weight of mature cows, and along with the body composition traits, in which case we might be able to, or we will be able to select animals which bend the growth curve to fit our production systems. So that's the challenge that I'd leave you, and really encourage you, I guess, to really reinforce that message of when you're taking the 200-day weights on your calves going forward, to make sure that you're weighing them, collecting body condition and height measurements, and really improving the tools that we have available and our ability as an Angus breed to develop that modern Angus curve bender. Ultimately, I guess what we're trying to do in this project, if I get right back to the Breeding Better Breeders project that we've got with the University of New England, is to develop better tools which will enable you as breeders of Angus cattle to breed more profitable Angus breeding females and really build on that strength that exists and has existed for a long time within the Angus breed. Thank you very much.